It's Friday, January 24th, 2020, and this is episode 14 of Film Cult Podcast. I am your host, Chris, and this week, as in every week, we are reviewing 3 different movies, having a little commentary on each one. I'm going to give my recommendation of whether I like the movie or not, and that is basically the format of the show. We certainly have 3 very different movies today to get into, all from different periods of time. So the 3 movies that I'm going to get into today are The Talented Mr. Ripley, which is from 1999. The next movie is Bad Times at the El Royale, which came out in 2018. And finally, we're going to end with 1983's horror sci-fi film Videodrome. So, like I said, 3 very different films. I could talk about each one of them for about 10 minutes, and that would be the show. I've been kind of going a little underhanded lately, going shorter on the time. Not that it matters at all, but I do like to keep it consistent at about 30 minutes. I had more to say about the last film of last week that I was going through the review of, but I had already wasted enough time editing it, and I couldn't really get a good audio recording with all the things going on in my house. So I just decided to scrap it, wait for the next episode. I can't even tell you what review it was. I'm trying to think of episode 13. The movie being... yeah, I can't remember. But anyway, let's get right into the reviews and start with 1999's American psychological thriller film, which was written and directed by Anthony Minghella, and it's an adaptation of Patricia Highsmith's 1955 novel of the same name, and that is The Talented Mr. Ripley, starring Matt Damon, Jude Law, Gwyneth Paltrow, and Cate Blanchett, along with Meredith Logue and, of course, Philip Seymour Hoffman. This movie feels a lot older than something that came out in 1999. Of course, with it being a period piece, the novel taking place in 1955, because it was written in 1955, it makes sense that it should feel older, but like the movie just itself feels a lot older. It's just a weird thing to say, I guess, but my explanation is that just like the techniques of the filmmaking, everything is well done in that regard, because yes, it feels like 1955, not only in the period piece of this film, but it also feels just like an older style of filmmaking. I don't know if it makes any sense, but anyway, there's a really big story here, and I feel like you can tell that this was adapted from a novel, again, just from the amount of character development, and I guess in this story there's a lot of back and forth, there's a lot of just big character relationships happening here and there, and without going too much into it, Tom Ripley is played by Matt Damon. He's making a living in 1950s New York. He is approached by a wealthy shipbuilder who is a father to one of Ripley's friends that he attended Princeton with. Sorry for all the cars driving past my house. My microphone on my laptop picks everything up. Anyway, this guy, Greenleaf, recruits Ripley for $1,000 to travel to Italy and persuade his son to return home to New York City. So, Ripley accepts. He meets another person on his way to Italy on the plane. It's kind of unrelated, but it kind of works its way back in later. He's kind of ends up living this double life. He gets to Italy, he finds Dickie, he ends up befriending him and learning a lot of Dickie's secrets, and they end up he ends up killing him. I was not going to spoil it, but then I just did. Maybe I'll write spoiler alert under there. But yeah, he ends up killing this guy's son and assuming his identity. And this basically goes into a 1950s style investigation with the police. They start asking around, where were you on this night, kind of thing. Um, because investigations were so different before you had DNA and fingerprint evidence. I think it's before that, definitely. So this film was pretty good, and it's got a lot of good talent for 1999. Matt Damon is perfect for Mr. Ripley. He's playing maybe I'm just biased. Catch Me If You Can came out in 2003. A few years later, he kind of plays that kind of impersonating, charismatic, like liar type of character that like Leo plays in that film. Catch Me If You Can, if you haven't seen, is Leonardo DiCaprio, Tom Hanks, Steven Spielberg film. Probably another one of my all-time favorite movies. Definitely on the list. Definitely top 5 almost, because it's just like a really fantastic story, and I do get hints of that type of character in this movie, which was nice. And as I talk more about the actual film, so the story keeps unfolding, and I don't want to give it all away. This film, like I said, is pretty good. I wouldn't call it the best thing ever. I wouldn't. I guess I'll just like soft recommend it because it did. I watched it like a week ago almost, with the intention of reviewing it earlier in the week, but now it is Friday and it's time for another episode, so I'm just talking about it now, and I am trying to recall the facts. The other 2 movies are quite more recent, so they're fresher in my head, the storylines. So, like I was saying, soft recommendation. It's a pretty good film. If you've seen Catch Me If You Can, or seen other Anthony Minghella films, I don't know what else he's directed, but I'm sure he puts his own style onto these different films. And one thing I also wanted to mention is that it was very reminiscent of a book that I read many years ago, like early when I was in some college course for English, which is another 1950s novel. This one was 1955 novel that it was based off of. And this novel that I'm talking about was also written in 1955, called The Quiet American, and I feel like it has a kind of similar plot. But The Quiet American taking place in Saigon, I believe, in Vietnam. Yeah, just a little correlation that I kind of thought, and maybe if someone's read that book too, maybe, or seen this movie, they could agree or disagree. But yeah, so that's just something I wanted to quickly mention. I had a tab open to talk about it. So yes, Talented Mr. Ripley gets a soft recommendation from me. It was a pretty good, I'd say like 6 or 7 out of 10 movie. So yeah, on to our second film review of the day, and we are talking a big time shift as far as when the movie was released, but as far as what the setting of the actual movie is, we're only jumping ahead a few years. This is Bad Times at the El Royale, which is a crime mystery movie that came out in 2018. It stars Jeff Bridges, Cynthia Erivo, Dakota Johnson, John Hamm, and of course Chris Hemsworth, just to name a few. Nick Offerman also has a very tiny role in this movie that was cool to see him in. That was just another name that, a household name, I guess. People that we all know, of course, from Parks and Recreation and Making It with Amy Poehler, things like that. So, I digress. Bad Times at the El Royale is directed, it's a thing I also say a lot, and written by Drew Goddard, who you may or may not know, but a lot of people did see a little horror movie that he came out with called The Cabin in the Woods. That was in 2011. This definitely has that overall feel to it that Cabin in the Woods had, and I mean that in a very good way. I think this movie, Bad Times with the El Royale, takes such a good direction with that kind of I don't know how to describe Cabin in the Woods if you haven't seen it, but it definitely turns the horror genre upside down and kind of it goes off the rails towards the end. I think anyone who's seen that could probably agree, and I think to its own intention that it did that. But this movie also kind of goes off the rails, but it has a good thing to tether the whole thing together. And so I will go into that when I'm talking about. But I really, 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 really enjoyed this movie. And my father's been recommending me to watch this movie since he watched it probably 2 years ago, 2018. And I've just haven't gotten to it. And I saw it on somewhere. And I decided, hey, I've been putting off seeing this movie for a terribly long time. So why don't I just watch it? And I really, really enjoyed it. The date that this movie takes place on is January 27th, 1969. So we are in the late 60s. The El Royale Hotel, which is based off the Cal Nevada Resort and Casino, which was owned by Frank Sinatra. Cal Neva, sorry, did I say that wrong? It's really, really cool. The film is shot with traditional set lighting, and it's beautiful. It really looks authentic and has a great style to it. I have a certain affinity for late 50s and 60s, like Googie style or a retro kind of look. So maybe it's just from my point of view, but I just really think the sets and the look of this entire movie is beautiful. And so this motel is entered by 4 or 5 different characters, or 3 or 4, and they are referred to by their room numbers, and we kind of basically weave through their stories, and they eventually interconnect. It's not the first movie to ever do that, but I really do enjoy movies that do that. They explore one character's timeline, and then they either go back or even forward by using another character and seeing how they are in the background of that other character's story. I'm trying to think of examples of other movies that do that as well as this one. Just to give you a better idea of what I'm saying, I'm trying to think of just anything, but I've read a lot of books like that too, where the characters weave in through their individual stories, weave through each other's stories, and that's life. I guess Magnolia is probably another film that I want to get to and review to that I think follows that plot line. I've never seen it, but those are future episodes to come. So anyway, this film gave me a lot of the same feelings of one of Tarantino's recent films, or 2 Tarantino's recent films, I guess. It really made me think of Hateful Eight, because that is exactly what I was just talking about. One of those stories that the characters intertwine and they eventually all meet up in one single place towards the very end. Sorry, again, I'm under the weather. But yeah, this film's a lot of fun. There's a lot of different twists and turns in this movie that are really enjoyable. There's a lot of scenes of silence or near silence, but the camera movement and the what is going on the screen is just captivating enough. And it's either silence or like a person singing, and the room is very quiet. And this is a really nice film direction in this movie. Chris Hemsworth is playing the main antagonist in this movie, and I think he does a really good job of bringing a Charlie Manson-esque character onto the film. That's what I was talking about. Another Tarantino movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which also features Manson, actual Manson. This film is kind of like a Manson-esque character of Billy Lee, played by Chris Hemsworth, who was also in Cabin in the Woods, that 2011 movie I was talking about. And so, anyway, I do recommend this movie. I would definitely give it a watch. I think from the first scene of the movie, you're like, oh, this is different and it's unique. And like I said, there's a lot of different twists and turns and plot developments that you don't see coming. This is definitely one worth reading the trivia after too, so you know what's on the tape. I won't say anything more than that. Yeah, there's just a lot of cool, interesting little tidbits of trivia that you should definitely read as you are watching or after you've watched. That's something I do with basically every movie, and I think I'm better off for it. So, without further ado, we will go into our third and final review of today. I'm running a little bit ahead, about 4 minutes ahead of schedule, so I will just quickly plug something that as of last week's episode, is very, very new, and that is that all these podcasts are available on Spotify. So this is an audio podcast that's been primarily on YouTube, and I do show posters and dates of the movie, but other than that, this definitely works as an audio-only podcast, so to have it only on YouTube was a dumb move. So if you listen to podcasts regularly and you do so on Spotify, these are all streaming on Spotify, so go onto there, listen to the show that way, and I appreciate you. So, that was my only little thing that I had to mention this week, and now we will talk about our third and final movie, which is the 1983 Canadian science fiction body horror film written and directed by David Cronenberg, and it stars James Woods, Sonia Smits, and Debbie Harry. This movie is definitely 83. It feels very 80s, obviously. And it kind of, yeah, it's very surrealist, very, if anyone knows the name David Cronenberg, he also directed The Fly with Jeff Goldblum, which is another creature horror film where I've never seen it, and I do want to see it because I do enjoy Jeff Goldblum and his characters on screen, but I digress. I just wanted to see this movie. This is just something I stumbled upon, and I haven't seen anything of David Cronenberg, so I figured I'd give this a shot. It's a very weird aesthetic in this film, and there's a lot of sexual and disturbing themes, and it plays to the fact that I think, or at least in my interpretation, that we have basically desensitized ourselves by watching so much violent and sexual themed television, and basically we follow the CEO of a small television station that just broadcasts extreme violence and torture just 24/7. And he comes across a Videodrome, and this film just features people basically getting killed, and he wants to learn more about the show, and his girlfriend ends up auditioning for the show and disappears, so then he goes and tracks down the owner of or the headquarters of where Videodrome was made, and meets a guy named Oblivion, and there's just a lot of, it goes deeper and deeper into this weird type of space that it's made. This weird alternate 1980 universe where, like, yeah, people are just watching porn all day and are very desensitized to any kind of emotion, and it takes sadomasochism to turn someone on or something. It's very, very odd. It's a very, very weird movie, and I can't say I recommend it. I'm reading here that it bombed um, when it was officially released in 1983, only making 2.1 million of its 5.9 million budget. Such low numbers, kind of wild. But the film does receive praise, and it also receives praise from me for its special effects makeups. There's a lot of weird visuals that are definitely ahead of its time. The TV's like that he's watching, this big box TV, is like pulsating and moving and like bursting. It almost reminded me of something from Ghostbusters, which would have been a few years later. Um, yeah, there's a VHS tape that is inserted into this man's abdomen. That's a pretty cool special effect there. Just kind of wild things like that. There's extreme gore. There's a hand melding into a pistol. He kind of becomes like a brainwashed assassin, and his hand is literally molded into a gun, or is vice versa, I guess. The gun is molded into his hand, like wired in, and he just starts killing the people that he works with. And it's very, very, very odd movie. I had trouble following it. I watched a little analysis after watching this video, or movie rather, and I guess I kind of gave me some more sense of it, but it was still very, very weird. Um, yeah, this is in the Criterion Collection. I'm not really even sure what that means at this point, but I don't know why this film is so highly praised. And I guess it's time to talk about the fact that this channel is called Film Cult, and for some reason, Videodrome to me, just even before ever seeing it, this week was my first time seeing it. That if you could think of a cult classic film, this is definitely one I would think has probably a very small but dedicated following, because it's just different, and um, I could just see people having nostalgic fondness for this. And maybe I'm wrong, but yeah, this channel, be called Film Cult, isn't necessarily about cult classic films. I was just saying that the name of it comes from just being such a fan to cinema that you kind of feel like you're in a cult with other people who are so into movies. It was just like a funny play on things. I'm very interested in cults, and that kind of stuff fascinates me, so I just kind of worked it into my channel name. That's just some brief trivia. I don't think I've ever talked about why this channel is called Film Cult until right now, so yes, but I digress. Videodrome would not get a recommendation from me. I can't say I really enjoyed it overall. The special effects were cool. A lot of stuff definitely ahead of its time for 1983. Just wacky video esque type things, like video graphics, special effects stuff that you probably wouldn't have seen otherwise in that year. So that kind of sums up my reviews for today, and we are hitting the 24-minute mark. Either I'm talking faster, I'm able to articulate things without saying and ah faster or something, but I've usually had no problem with getting to 30 minutes, and now I am basically struggling to get past 25 minutes, and that's pretty odd, but it's still longer than my previous episode. Like I said, I had more to say. That movie was Death Becomes Her. Now that I'm looking at it, yeah, I had a few more things I probably wanted to finish up saying, but like I said, it's hard to get 30 minutes of time for me completely alone and not bothered by either the street or just noise in my house. Television downstairs is particularly loud, so what I'm saying now is uh, basically that the episode is over. I have more movies that I plan on reviewing and talking about. I mentioned Magnolia is one of those films that I wanted to see. That has Tom Cruise, Philip Seymour Hoffman again. I didn't really talk about his performance in Talented Mr. Ripley, but it just goes without saying that he's just a really, really decent actor. Always gives a good performance. But anyway, I have some new movies that I was able to acquire. I probably shouldn't say more than that. Bombshell, Richard Jewell, Ford vs. Ferrari. These are all newer releases. Motherless Brooklyn with Edward Norton. I've been watching more TV. I've got some recommendations for different shows on Apple TV, and those being M. Night Shyamalan series called Servant. I haven't talked about M. Night Shyamalan on this podcast, but I do have a certain just fondness of his movies. I really enjoyed Signs growing up as a kid. I don't know how many people have seen that movie nowadays, but that's Mel Gibson and Joaquin Phoenix. I believe there's a Culkin in that film. Maybe not Macaulay Culkin. I could be totally wrong, but maybe, hey, I should look it up because I have a laptop in front of me. But I digress. So, M. Night Shyamalan, if you don't know, is a pretty famous, well-known writer and director of psychological movies with twists in them, and he has a very unique and distinctive style, and I feel like that's something that I've always latched onto. I do like when directors have certain tropes and signatures on their films. And another director in another movie I was watching last night that I was thinking of maybe reviewing, maybe not reviewing, but why not? We're here. I watched Sweeney Todd, and I might do a review of that. I loved that film when it came out in 2007. Johnny Depp, Helena Bonham Carter, and of course Alan Rickman, among others. And I really, really, really love that film. I mean, both of my parents go to Tapey to go see that film, so they both had to see it, and then I could see it twice. I just really enjoyed that film, and I enjoyed watching it last night, definitely in a nostalgic sense. But what I'm getting to is that Tim Burton has a very distinctive style. He opens his movies usually with either a machinery or type of what's the word I'm looking for? A belt, like a assembly line style kind of opening credits, and it's just something I enjoy. Also with M. Night Shyamalan, going back to Signs and this show that I'm watching, Servant, that is pretty good. I never talk about TV shows on this podcast, but I really do want to. I want to explore True Detective again. The first season, I know the second season was not very good, and the third season kind of brought things back. But the first season with Matthew McConaughey and he whose name Woody Harrelson, there we go. I almost said Ed Harris. Season 1 of True Detective I remember being super, super strong, and I want to explore that again, and as well as talking about Servant, which has been pretty good so far. I'm almost, I think, a little more than halfway through it. Like I said, I like M. Night Shyamalan. He has a very unique style of shooting things, and he's directed a couple episodes. This is very Mindhunter-y in the sense of he produced the show. I believe he wrote the show. He's directed a few episodes, and then he gives it off to another director who follows his style, basically. Yeah, just something different. I do love coming across either television shows or movies that just are different, going a little bit against the grain. So I just wanted to mention those kind of things to fill up some time, I guess. thank you for listening. As always, this has been episode 14 of Film Cult Podcast, a podcast that comes out every single Friday. I usually discuss 3 movies of different genre and time periods. It literally could be anything. Something that I think I even missed over the last episode. If you have any suggestions or recommendations for movies, anything of that sort, you can always email me at filmquotepodcast@gmail.com. I am on Spotify, I'm on YouTube, and that has been episode 14. I will see everybody next week for 3 more films. Have a great weekend and enjoy it.